When strength meets softness, the sacred journey of caregiving. Have you ever found yourself standing in a hospital hallway caught between two worlds? One where you're the professional, composed, knowledgeable, and control, and another where you're just human, vulnerable, scared. That intersection, that's where transformation happens. I recently had the privilege of interviewing LaToya Bell, a remarkable healthcare professional whose journey through caregiving has fundamentally changed how we understand strength. LaToya isn't just sharing her story, she's igniting a revolution in how we perceive vulnerability, especially for Black women who have long carried the weight of the superwoman cape. Her wisdom, born from both professional expertise and profound personal pain, offers us a roadmap for navigating life's most challenging moments with both grace and authenticity. The truth is, we're not meant to do life alone. Not the hard parts, not the beautiful parts, none of it. When Latoya's mother suffered a stroke in 2023, everything changed. As someone who had spent years working in healthcare, she suddenly found herself on the other side of the clipboard, watching her mother, her rock, need the kind of care she had provided to countless others. I thought I understood what families went through, she shared with me, her voice breaking slightly. But until you're sitting in that waiting room, watching the clock tick by, praying for good news about someone you love, you don't really know. That's the thing about life's deepest lessons, isn't it? They don't arrive in comfortable packages with pretty bows. They come wrapped in challenges that force us to grow beyond what we thought possible. For Latoya, this meant learning to drop the professional mask when it was time to be a daughter. It meant allowing herself to cry in the hospital chapel. It meant accepting help from colleagues who saw her struggling to balance work shifts with hospital visits. It meant softness. And isn't that what we're all learning? That softness isn't weakness, it's a different kind of strength altogether. Consider Latoya Stewart, a family nurse practitioner with over a decade of experience across various healthcare settings. When her mother faced a health crisis, Stewart's professional knowledge collided with personal vulnerability in ways she never anticipated. I knew exactly what the doctors were saying, Stewart confessed during our conversation. I understood the medical terminology, the treatment protocols, but emotionally, I was just as terrified as any other daughter would be. What made the difference for Stewart wasn't pushing through alone, it was leaning into faith based resilience strategies and seeking support from colleagues who had walked similar paths. Her vulnerability became her strength, leading her to advocate for more robust caregiver resources within her facility. The result? Improved patient family communication protocols that have benefited countless families experiencing similar crises. Her pain transformed into purpose. This is what happens when we allow ourselves to be both strong and soft. When we stop seeing vulnerability as something to overcome and start recognizing it as the birthplace of connection, innovation, and healing. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you allowed yourself to be truly vulnerable, to say, I don't know how to do this, or I need help? For many of us, especially high achieving Black women, those words feel foreign on our tongues. We've been conditioned to handle everything, to keep it together, to be the rock everyone else leans on. But what if our greatest contribution isn't always in our strength? What if sometimes it's in our willingness to be human? Latoya Tolliver's story illuminates this beautifully. As an oncology navigator since 2016, Tolliver supports cancer patients through complex treatment decisions. But her approach was forever changed after losing her aunt to cancer just before starting this role. That personal loss deepened both her empathy toward clients' families and her commitment to ensuring no one felt alone navigating difficult choices. She began developing individualized resource guides tailored to each patient's cultural background and spiritual needs, including connections to local churches or prayer groups when requested. The impact? Patients reported feeling less isolated. Some even credited their improved mental health outcomes, partly to Tolliver's holistic approach that honored both their medical needs and their humanity. This is what happens when we bring our whole selves to our work and our relationships. When we allow our personal experiences, even the painful ones, to inform how we show up for others. But let's be honest, this kind of integration isn't easy. It requires tremendous courage to stand in that vulnerable space where your professional knowledge meets your personal pain. It requires faith, faith in something bigger than yourself, faith that your vulnerability won't break you but remake you, faith that your story, especially the chapters you'd rather keep hidden, might be exactly what someone else needs to hear to feel less alone. LaToya Bell emphasized this repeatedly in our conversation. Faith and resilience are essential when navigating personal and professional hardships. Her journey since 2023, especially as she's cared for her mother after her stroke while working in healthcare, has shown her the importance of leaning on faith and finding strength through challenges. But faith doesn't mean you have to do it alone. In fact, true faith often leads us toward community, not isolation. Consider LaToya Edwards, a licensed professional counselor who has supported individuals managing trauma related to major life transitions since 2011. Edwards noticed that many clients struggled emotionally after placing parents into care facilities, experiencing guilt, anxiety about the quality of care their loved ones received, and often lacked access to culturally competent counseling services. Her solution? Integrating cognitive behavioral therapy techniques alongside faith based counseling options to help Black caregivers process grief without stigma while honoring their spirituality. The outcomes were remarkable. Clients reported significant improvement not only in coping skills, but also a renewed sense of hope grounded firmly within their cultural identity. This is what happens when we create spaces where people can bring their whole selves, their faith, their culture, their fears, their hopes. Healing happens, community forms, purpose emerges from pain. And isn't that what we're all seeking? Not just to survive our challenges, but to find meaning in them, to transform our suffering into something that serves others. The emotional toll of caregiving is real, but so is the power of community and support. LaToya Bell discovered this firsthand when placing a loved one in care facilities where she'd worked brought a new perspective on empathy, vulnerability, and the need for compassionate systems. She found herself on both sides of the caregiving equation, providing care professionally while needing support personally. That dual perspective changed everything about how she approached her work and her personal healing journey. It taught her that your story and your pain can be transformed into purpose, that sharing our journeys openly can inspire others facing similar fears, letting them know they are not alone. This is the sacred alchemy that happens when we stop trying to be superhuman and embrace being beautifully perfectly human instead. When we allow ourselves to be soft in a world that taught us survival, when we recognize that dropping the cape isn't giving up, it's growing up, when we understand that boundaries aren't selfish, they're sacred, when we learn that rest isn't lazy, it's revolutionary, especially for Black women who have carried so much for so long, who have been the backbone of families, communities, workplaces, who have been told explicitly and implicitly that their worth is tied to their productivity, their strength, their ability to endure. What would happen if we collectively decided to redefine strength, to see it not just in endurance, but in vulnerability, not just in giving, but in receiving, not just in doing, but in being? This is the invitation before us today to stand in that sacred intersection where professional knowledge meets personal experience, where strength meets softness, where doing meets being. I challenge you to take 3 actions from this moment forward. First, examine where in your life you've been wearing the superwoman cape. Where have you been strong for too long? Where might vulnerability actually be your path to healing? Second, create space for someone else's vulnerability today. When a colleague, friend, or family member shows signs of struggle, resist the urge to offer quick solutions. Instead, simply say, I see you and you're not alone. Finally, share your story, especially the parts that feel too messy or unfinished. Your journey through caregiving, grief, or personal challenge might be exactly the lifeline someone else needs to hold on to. Because when we dare to be both strong and soft, when we honor both our resilience and our need for rest, we don't just transform our own lives. We create ripples that change our families, our communities, our healthcare systems, and ultimately our world. This is how we heal, not in isolation, but in community, not by being perfect, but by being present, not by having all the answers, but by asking for help when we need it. This is how we transform, by allowing our pain to connect us rather than isolate us, by seeing our vulnerability not as weakness, but as the birthplace of courage, connection, and change. This is how we honor the sacred journey of caregiving, by recognizing that sometimes the greatest care we can offer others begins with caring for ourselves. And this is how we create a world where strength and softness aren't opposites, but partners in the beautiful, messy, sacred dance called life. The time for superhuman expectations is over. The era of integrated humanity has begun. Will you join us?